Okay, so this should be interesting to look at. We now finally have information about the PTE build. Or at least information about it has been posted on Steam. I think there are some people making videos about it or leaking it, but I don't generally pay attention to things like that. Anyway, so we have... Happy to announce the PTE Steam branch will be available to everyone to join on April 22nd at 5 p.m. Central European Standard Time, which I think is like 10 a.m. East Coast time. Which, let me just check a calendar real quick. I think that is next Wednesday. I believe the 22nd is next Wednesday. Yes, the 22nd is next Wednesday. So, what that tells me is that this is probably going to go up on a Saturday, or on the Saturday, which is the 18th. And so a video about the PTE, me actually looking at the PTE, is probably going to go up the Saturday after that. Anyway, on this branch, you'll be able to test a wide range of gameplay improvements, balance adjustments, and new systems designed to deepen strategy and enhance overall battlefield dynamics, such as they're changing the game mode, Conquest, with multiple score thresholds. 500, 1,000, 1,500 points are gained or lost based on zone control, with a fixed tick rate per objective. Destruction points remain unchanged, and a phase-based WP compensation has been removed. I don't know what WP stands for. Income changes. Income is now calculated more non-linearly based on the number of deployed units, with a cap of 1,500 points. The system is designed to improve early game dynamics, encourage smaller and lighter armies, including air play styles, and the ability to extend an army. I'm not entirely sure what that means, but I'll come back to that one. General changes: the new anti-overkill system has been added. Infantry transport vehicles can now carry supply crates as an ability that can resupply and heal infantry. That one I think is very interesting. Ground units have custom respawn timers visible in their stats. Damage for automatic weapons in the unit info panel is now displayed as damage per second. New map layouts have been introduced, and infantry now inherit stress from destroyed transports. Which is something, it's kind of funny, because that's something I've seen a lot of people whining about, is when they ambush a transport, the infantry just pops out and murders their ambusher. And they were calling for, like, infantry need to die when infantry inside a transport need to die when their transport dies. Which is really funny, because when you see that, someone whining about that in one suggestion post on the Discord, that's funny, when the post right next to it is literally people saying that infantry should survive when the helicopter they're in crashes. It's like, okay, cool, pick one. Anyway, recon units. A new sneak ability allows certain recon units to increase stealth at the cost of movement speed. Base stealth for these units has been slightly reduced. Infantry weapons have improved damage and range. The damage reduction system has been reworked so that they are more resilient when calm or shocked and more vulnerable when panicked. Tank gun damage has been increased, and aiming time for various vehicles' weapons has been reduced. Artillery has longer range and aim time with increased costs. Howitzers are now divided into tiers with different roles and loadouts. Reload time has increased, and 82mm mortars gain an auto-fire option, which could be very interesting. Especially since, now that I think about it, I think there's only one 82mm mortar the US has access to. Excuse me. Anti-air damage and range has been slightly reduced, with missile damage capped to prevent one-shot kills. Radar bonuses against low-flying air targets has been reduced, and vertical launch systems have faster animations. Helicopter agility has been slightly improved. Transport helicopters' price is reduced, and ATGM aim time shortened. Aircraft refund timers now depend on rearm time of ammunition instead of cost. Air superiority fighters rearm faster. Aircraft pricing has been standardized based on loadouts. Cargo planes prices have been reduced. To celebrate, we will be live on Slytherin's Twitch channel, starting at 3 p.m. Your feedback will be invaluable for helping us shape and refine the update before it is released to the main branch. Don't miss it. And as for the update, this link right here, this leads to this. So this is what I'm going to be looking at. Hey, so Editor Gray here. When I recorded this, at some point in the 2.5 hours it actually took me to record this, I guess I just forgot that this was supposed to be for a PTE build of the game and not an actual update. Or at least I forgot that during parts of it. So for some parts, like something involving the CV90 coming up, I act like this is just an update to the game, and I'm not entirely sure why I did that. And besides, this isn't, I mean, aside from the fact that it's not an actual update to the game, it's honestly, it's not even going to remain, there's no guarantee that it's going to, that all the changes are going to be concrete even within the PTE build, because the whole point of the PTE build is to test things and see what works and what doesn't, what needs changes and what doesn't. So I would not at all be surprised if these values change at some point somewhere. So, and first, they apparently have new map variants for the Dam, Chernikovsk. I am not sure how to pronounce that. And Oil Rush. And the new Conquest mode with the phases that they were talking about. All-time limit 2,000. I'm not entirely sure what that means. Point tick rate for one capture objective is set to 10 points per second. Conquest points can either be awarded or removed based on zone ownership. Destruction points rules remain unchanged. Compensation between phases has been removed. 10 points per second. That means like 50 seconds you're going to be getting 500 points. So I'm not entirely sure what all of this means. And to be entirely honest, I don't play multiplayer. I know a lot of people play multiplayer, and I know pretty much all the game's balancing decisions have centered around multiplayer, but I don't play multiplayer. It's just not something that interests me. So I'm not entirely sure what all of this means or how all this has to do with a in a multiplayer sense. I mean, I've only played like I think 3 or maybe 4 skirmish games. So, and that's against the AI. Much less anything against actual players. Added a new income V3 system with dynamic segments. I'm not entirely sure how this works. I assume the gradual line is basically how it used to work, with the solid line being the way it works now, going all the way up to 5,000 points, presumably 5,000 points deployed. But this kind of brings me to something that I want to highlight in here, which is income is now calculated non-linearly based on the number of deployed units with a cap at 1,500 points. Now, does that mean that if you just keep building up points, you're not going to build up any more than 1,500? Because if you remember, when I made my video about playing the absolutely airdroppable deck on Baltisk, the first thing I did was I played the first stage of that scenario very, I don't know, slowly is probably the best word to use, and I ended up building up like 4,000 or 5,000 points, so I could airdrop a bunch of things. And if memory serves, for a significant portion of that operation, that scenario, I did not have any income because I had so many units fielded. And so I'm wondering if they're doing the same thing here. Or not the same thing here, but I wonder what they're... words. I wonder if what they're doing here is going to prevent that. If it's going to stay capped at 1,500, which I guess I mean, I suppose that's supposed to encourage players to keep rotating their units in and out, but I don't know. That idea doesn't necessarily sound fun to me, because I like just amassing a solid and great big army and then slamming it into the opponent. And they talk about to improve early game dynamics, encourage smaller and lighter armies, which I just said I don't necessarily prefer small and light. I prefer big and heavy. And the ability to extend an army. And I would really like some confirmation on what this is right here. And they're not giving me that. I do also have the game open in case I need to check something. New, more standardized cooldown timers, resurrection and refund for every type of unit has been added. Which is interesting, because I think the way the cooldown timers work is it's like a cost metric. It's based on how much the unit costs. Like, it's like a divisor on how much the unit costs. Actually, that's something I can check. Hang on just a second. Okay, I'm not entirely sure how. Calculating that. 530. 190, 155. I'm honestly not entirely sure how they're calculating this. But apparently, we are going to get... apparently they're going to change that. Resurrection timer now displayed a unit's card. In addition, a refund timer can now be found in the pop-up tooltip. Resupply radius for supply dumps has been increased from 50 to 75 meters. Max camera height has been increased by 100 meters. Delay between bursts of automatic weapons from vehicles no longer affected by stress, which I suppose makes a degree of sense. The machine is not stressed, it just depends on how often the gunner decides to pull the trigger. And so next we have infantry. What's this? Not sure. Infantry resist system inverted. The full percentage available to the squad in a calm state, moderate and shocked, and minimal in panic. So basically the way it works is that infantry have a sort of damage resistance value that goes up depending on their state. So an infantry state that is calm has basically no damage resistance. When they're stressed, they get some, and then when they're panicked, they get full. I assume this is meant to basically increase infantry survivability. So you can stick so your infantry can get stuck in, do some damage, take some damage, and then you can pull them out and they're not going to get immediately evaporated unless they just get hit with a massive attack like a bomb or something. The fact that they're inverting this is kind of interesting. So, I mean, I don't know exactly what it's going to lead to, but I think it's very interesting. Added an over-damage system with a threshold of 38 damage or higher, which allows weapons to ignore infantry resistance in an open field. So I'm guessing that if a weapon does more than 38 damage, it's not going to care what a infantry unit's resistance is. It's just going to basically nuke them. And that's assuming that they aren't in a building or forest. Although 38 damage is an interesting threshold because infantry squads have their um, their health based on the number of people in it, with 5 hit points per person in the squad. So a 5-man squad has 25 health. A 10-man squad has 50 health. 25. A 3-man squad has 15 health. Or even a 14-man squad has 70 health. So I wonder how exactly that damage threshold is going to affect things, because that basically means that any squad with 8 units or more isn't going to get one shot even by an attack that hits that 38 damage threshold. That doesn't necessarily mean the squad isn't going to get one shot at all, but if you have an attack that does 39 damage, it's still not going to one shot the squad. So I don't know how that's going to affect the I don't know exactly how that's going to affect the infantry combat yet. But I think it'd be very, very interesting to see. Squad loss prioritization system, order in which they die when taking enough damage, has been standardized across all infantry units. This, I assume, basically means that, basically, depending on how the squad dies, is going to, well, exactly what it says, it's going to be standardized. Normally, what happens is each weapon is tied to a specific unit model, right? It's tied to a specific guy. And so when the unit gets into a firefight, if something happens to one of those guys, their weapons get taken off the board. This is why banged up squads don't have a whole lot of DPS. But if, say, this unit gets into a firefight, and the guy with the M2 Browning back here gets hit, the M2 Browning is basically taken and removed from the squad's list of weapons. Now, to my knowledge, this isn't necessarily randomized on what model gets removed from the squad when it takes a certain amount of damage. Some squads, particularly ATGM squads, from my understanding, have a system in place where it sort of favors the individual models with the ATGMs. So they're some of the last models to actually be lost as the squad takes damage and the squad's health goes down. I don't know exactly how it works, to be entirely honest. That is from my understanding. And I'd be very interested to hear more information about what exactly they mean by standardizing all this. Shock and panic states for infantry are a bit more spaced out. I assume that has to do with the amount of suppression that a weapon does. I closed BA Armory. I need to bring that back up. Here. So here's basically what I'm talking about. This suppression. Weapons do a certain amount of suppression, and from my understanding, an infantry unit, or anything really, has 1,000 hit points, for lack of a better term, of suppression health. So when a unit gets hit by any of these weapons, this suppression is applied to their suppression health, for lack of a better term. And that is what does damage to a or that's what causes a unit to panic or become stressed. And these figures can change. I believe I need to find infantry. Because what I was saying about 1000 suppression health... Where is... There's Delta. Because 1000 suppression health is you have flashbangs. Flashbangs do basically no damage. They have no range, but they do 1000 suppression damage. And what flashbangs do is they instantly panic any squad or any infantry unit in a building, because for all intents and purposes, when two units on separate sides enter the same building and fight, they are effectively right on top of each other as far as the game is concerned. Thank you. And so what this does is that weapons with a very short range like flashbangs can't be used pretty much in any other environment except for literally in a building. Excuse me. This is also where weapons with a minimum range come in, which prevents them from being used in a building as well. Boy. That's... I'm dumb. Where was I? Infantry shocked and panic aim times multiplier has been increased from 1 to 2 and 2 to 3 accordingly. So I'm guessing now it takes longer for them to aim when they're shocked and panicked. Base tier optics for infantry has been increased from 1200 meters to 1400 meters. Max tier stealth for infantry has been reduced from 3 to 2.5, which I think is kind of interesting. Spotted penalty in buildings has been reduced from 2 to 1.45. It will be harder to maintain constant vision on spotted infantry in buildings from long distances. Okay. And then they have reworked small arms and LATs, which I'm guessing is supposed to mean like light anti-tank. So just do that. And LAT ranges. So yes, I'm assuming this is light anti-tank, or basically launchers. So we now basically have 400 meters as a minimum range. Small. The extra range on the small is nice. I'll say that. That's not changed. The AT4 is not changed. RPG 26s and 30s and 27s and 28s are not changed. RAWs is not changed. RPG 29s is not changed. MAWs is not changed. Most of this stuff isn't changed. It's just appears to be a lot of the shorter range launchers. And then we have underbarrel grenade launcher range matches rifle range. And they have buffed up the ranges for a lot of rifles. Carbines go up. Assault light machine guns. So I'm guessing things like this, with these very high damage values. Vanilla new damage. Is that supposed to be DPS? I'm not entirely sure. Assault DMRs, which I wonder if that's supposed to be the VSS specifically, because that's the only DMR that I know of that fits in that range bracket. Rifles now go out slightly further with slightly more base pen. Battle rifles now shoot out slightly further with significantly less pen. Okay. Light machine guns, slightly more maximum pen. DMRs. I'm not sure what that is. Probably nothing much. DMRs now shoot out further, which is nice. General purpose machine guns. I assume this is things like the PKP or the or the M240. Well, no, because there's two different DMRs here. Is this supposed to be like silenced DMRs? I'm not sure. And then machine guns just didn't change. 6.5. I'm guessing this is like the 6.5 Creedmoor. They lowered the range on that and slightly increased the minimum pen. 2.7. 6.5 GMPG or DMR. 2.7. What is Delta? 2. Okay, and that's like what, 2.7? Yeah, so that's a pretty significant change. 6.5 millimeter, or the Creedmoor rifles get less pen and 1.8 damage, which I think is more damage but less pen. So, okay, yeah, it's significantly more damage, but again, less pen, which kind of sucks. The M7 Spear gets also less pen and 1.5 damage. I'm trying to think. 1.5. Isn't that what the M7 already has? Airborne. There's Airborne. No, it's 1.2. Okay, so it has less pen, but it's doing more damage. That's interesting. And then it says the M27. And this one is very, very interesting to me. Because the only M27, the only infantry rifle called an M27 that I know of is these. So, are you telling me that Marines are now going to get 600-meter rifle range? Because if the answer to that question is yes, then these guys just got very interesting. Because honestly, at least for me, one of the biggest issues with Marines is that they do not have any machine guns or DMRs or things like that. So they don't have anything that has that extra range. Like, if I were to go with something like troopers, for example, you have rifles, but then you have a machine gun. And sure, there's not any extra range, but it is extra damage. Troopers AA is another example. You have slightly longer range. This doesn't really apply too much to the US as much as it applies... Well, I mean, it does kind of apply to squads like Rangers, where you have basic 400-meter range rifles, but longer ranged things like DMRs. This is kind of comparable, or I say comparable. The thing that I'm thinking of about having support weapons with longer ranges is more easily seen with Russian infantry. You have 400-meter range AKs, but 600-meter range machine guns and DMRs. Marines don't have that. Now, I'm not necessarily saying the Marines need that, but it's always made them a little bit underwhelming. At least for me. So that could be interesting. And 1.5 damage, I think, is up, because I think it's only like 1.2. Where is Marines? No, it stays the same. But this would also add more distinction between the Marines, the standard Marines, and the reserve Marines. Okay, we don't have anything over here. LAT stress damage value multiplier increased caliber times 2 versus caliber times 4. That's a point. Where is... The Carl Gustav is an 84mm launcher, so 84 times 2 is going to be 168. Is that what we see here? Yes, it is. Okay. The RPG-28 that guard motor rifles have is, if memory serves, a 125mm rocket. So is that going to be 250? 210. Okay, so it's a 105. No, it's 125. Okay, so it's the RPG-27 that is 105, which is carried, if memory serves, by naval infantry, which also does 210. Okay, so that tracks. The RPG-30 is carried by... Now, I know the RPG-30 is a 125mm launcher as well. Oh, no, it's only 105? $650, 10. Hang on, I thought this thing had... Hang on. Guards. 10, 4, 9. Where is coastal? Nine, 4, 650. $7.5, 4, 450. Huh. Okay. I thought the RPG-30 was a variant of the RPG-28. Not a variant of the RPG-27. Or, I say variant. I thought it had the same damage stats as the RPG-28, not the RPG-27. Okay. I guess you learn something new every day. What? Actually, while I'm here, where is... That's 173, I think. Where is this? The RPG-29. It's 105mm heat. It's just reloadable. Okay. Anyway. Under Broken Arrow launcher stress damage value multiplier reduced. Caliber 1, caliber 0.5. So... Under barrel grenade launcher. The current stress value is 80? Is that? Because it should, I think, be 40. No, okay, that's saying 80, which would be a 2 times multiplier. That's also 80. That's 60, which implies a 2 times multiplier. Interesting. Added a 1.33 multiplier to building exit time during the active sprint ability. So I assume that increases the time it takes for the unit to leave the building with sprint? Or no, I think that would reduce the time it takes to leave the building with sprint. Added a new sneak ability for the following infantry: VDV snipers, Diversanti, which I believe is so VDV snipers, Diversanti, specifically the informers. The PDSS with the ADS, scout snipers, airborne snipers, ranger snipers, or green berets with either the flash or the sniper rifles. So not the Punisher. The KNT and the sniper and the EST, which, because the PDSS, their stealth value doesn't change if they have the grenade launcher. And neither does green berets. Their stealth value doesn't change. Anyway. Healing rate for infantry has been reduced from 1 hit point per second to half a hit point per second. Healing cost reduced to 1 kilogram of supply per hit points. I wonder what it was before. Infantry firing position in buildings has been adjusted to more easily hit a tank's roof armor. This one is very interesting because I thought this was the case where if you put infantry in a high-rise building and a tank pulled up right next to it, they would be firing down onto the roof. So this one again is very interesting. 100 meters for 5-story, 200 meters for 9-story, and 400 meters for high-rise. Which I think is interesting because being in these high-rise buildings don't increase the range of your AT options. So presumably, if you have a unit in a high-rise building with a 400-meter range AT4, and a T90M rolls up, they're going to be able to fire down onto the roof of that tank pretty much right away. So, I think that's kind of interesting. Oh, and they've buffed the number of missiles for the VDV Igla. And they've added another RPG-28 for the Guard Mostostreliki. The SSO CQC, the Burr has been swapped out for an RPO-M. Isn't that a thermal barrack? Where is motor? So they have 2 Burrs, an RPO-M. Okay, yeah, it is thermobaric. I was thinking incendiary, but it is thermobaric. 500, 9.5, 95. What is the Burr doing? 300, 6, 60. Okay, so the Burr is doing much less. That's doing significantly more. Okay. Okay. PDSS with the DP64 have their optics reduced. Recon Naval Infantry have an extra RPG-27 added from 3 to 4. Where's Naval Infantry? Ah. Okay, I didn't realize they had RPG-27s. I mean, it makes sense, but I didn't realize they had them. And then the Cherry Berries, they get a basically complete rework. A 12-man squad with 2 new loadouts. A close quarters loadout for 100 points with 9 AN-94s, 3 GP-34s, an RPK-74M, 2 of them, an SVU-A, and an RSG-1, 6. RPK-74M. Isn't that what these guys get? And they get, what is it? An SVU? SVU-A. And an RSG-1, which I think is what they already have. Yes. And they get 6 of them, so they get 1 more. An SVU. I have seen that gun before, and I'm trying to think of where. There it is. Well, an SVUAS. I assume it's going to be the same. Okay. And then a standoff with 9 A94s, 3 GP34s, 2 PKPs, an SVD, and then an RPG-29. SVD. SVD. I assume they mean this thing? But what I find very interesting is that they get an RPG-29, which is this. Also, in case it's not apparent yet, I have actually already looked through this before making this video, so I'm not going in cold. But they get an RPG-29, which is basically just an RPG-27 that is reloadable rather than disposable. An SVDS. That's a point. Is there actually an SVDS? There's an SVDK. SVDK. Okay, I just assumed they mean the SVD. Also, I find it very interesting that they've increased the size to 12 man. And thinking about it, and because back during the November beta, the Cherry Berries were actually in a 14-man squad. And they had an option of either taking the RPG-27 or the larger RPG-28 as their customization option. But it was a large 14-man squad, similar to Marine Raiders. But I find it kind of interesting that they've made it 12, because if it's a 12-man squad, I mean, if we're talking Coastal, the only vehicle that Coastal has that they could fit in is this one, the BT3F with its 14 seats. But it could also fit a 14-man squad like the one from the beta, the November 2024 beta. Another vehicle that could fit the 14-man squad would be the BTR MDM, which has 15 seats. The reason why I find 12 kind of interesting because... The reason why I find 12 kind of interesting because it also means that you could fit the unit into this thing. A NMTLB, which you can actually make this thing surprisingly heavily armed, all things considered. So I guess you could use it as like an ersatz IFV for the Cherry Berries, which I guess I could see, but I mean, the only alternative would be this, or you could take this and just throw the add-on armor onto it with the admittedly nowhere near as good autocannon. Or you could try and take this with the anti-aircraft gun, which makes it hideously expensive, and the add-on armor. Even then, though, I'd like to point out it's still not as tough. 80 to 180 versus 30 to 1. Okay, so this is actually the least tough of the bunch. Or with the least armor. It does get smoke, though, and it can't swim. Then again, this thing also gets smoke. It can swim and has a whole lot more armor. This thing also gets smoke. It can also swim and has more armor. So. Anyway, I just find 12 to be kind of interesting. Personally, I've always thought that they should basically standardize the number of men in Russian squads to 8. With the exception of VDV, because VDV, I mean, the jump from 5 to 8 with VDV might be a bit extreme, whereas the jump from 7 to 8 with Coastal and Mech aren't going to be as extreme. Razvedka gets an additional RPG-26, and the PKM has been swapped to an AKM, which is kind of interesting because in one of their previous updates, didn't they change view all? Yes. In one of the previous updates, I think it was update 1.0.11, they adjusted it to... They gave them the PKM. Instead of a... They gave them the machine gun to try and make them more popular. Yeah, here we go. Razvedka squads receive a PKM machine gun replacing their AKM rifles. Which, with the way that's phrased, is that all Razvedka? Because there's different Razvedka. No, those guys do not get one. I mean, I assume they're just talking about Razvedka. These guys. But there's different levels of Razvedka. Like, for example, there's Naval Razvedka, which also doesn't get one. So, they were only talking about this then. Anyway. Guard Sturmoviki with a CQC loadout. All KSKs are set as secondary weapons. An additional 3 AK-74Ms on the main slot and KSKs on the second slot. So do they get 1 KSK in total? Because when it says secondary weapons, I assume it means like... where's Delta? There's Delta. Actually, know what? Here's a better example. No, that's not a better example. Wait, would that be a better example? Yes, this actually would be a better example. Note the guy with the flash launcher also has the shotgun. Actually, no, that's a bad example. The game seems to treat grenade launchers like the Mark 32 kind of like it treats rifles. But note how the guy with the Mark 32 also has a shotgun. So I would assume the shotgun is considered a secondary weapon because you can't use the Mark 32 in CQC. You can kind of see something similar over here with the, at least I thought. Yeah, with, actually this is a very good example because you have some guys with rifles and then some guys with shotguns. Or it's not just rifles. That guy has a rifle and a shotgun, but this guy has a light machine gun and a shotgun. So I assume I don't know. I assume that's what they're talking about when they say secondary weapon slots. RPOM replaced with an RPOA. The thermobaric. RPOM replaced with an RPOA. RPOM. What is an RPOA? That's a burr. What is an RPOA? Hang on. I think I remember RPOA. Yes, I do. 6, 9.5, 95 versus... Where is... There it is. 9.5. So... It's exactly the same, just with slightly less blast radius. I'm pretty sure it's exactly the same, just with slightly less blast radius. Okay. Marine Raiders CQC, all M1014s are now set as secondary weapons. An additional 4 Mark 18 CQBRs. Does it have... Do Marine Raiders actually have 4 shotguns? Yes. Yes, they have 4 shotguns. Okay, noted. So they're gonna have 14 of these rifles. Oh, that ought to be fun. I'm just realizing that if they buff the range of the M27 out to 600 meters, these guys are going to be stupid powerful. Like, honestly, if they do that, the only thing I could ask to make them better is to just give me a second Moz. These guys are going to be fun. Mech Rifleman, an additional M249 has been, instead of an M4, which I think means that they now have 2 M249s. Mech Rifleman. Yeah, that would mean 2 M249s. Scouts get an additional AT4 RS. There's a difference. There's AT4 CS RS and AT4 CS HP, and I'm not entirely sure the difference between the two. Actually, that is a point. Give me recon, give me infantry, give me America in general. Scouts, AT4 CS RS, and I believe Rangers, yep, AT4 CS HP. 8.5, 600. 8.5, 4. Oh! Okay, so that's the difference. The HP has more penetration. Huh. Neat. So is there any other infantry units that get the HP? No, that gets RS. 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 Those don't get one. Those only get RS. 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 Moz. RS. So the only unit in the game that gets the AT4 HP is RRC. BA Armory. RRC. Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. .84mm tandem versus what I'm guessing is just 84mm heat. Okay. That's interesting. I think you could make a decent upgrade out of just having the option to swap out the AT4 CS RS with the AT4 CS HP. I don't even know what RS and HP stand for. I know that CS in AT4 CS stands for combined space. Because the thing about the AT4, it's not a rocket launcher. I mean, it kind of looks like a rocket launcher. It's not a rocket launcher. It's a recoilless rifle. It is, in effect, no different than the Carl Gustav. In fact, the AT4 is literally a variant of the Carl Gustav. It's just a disposable single-shot version of the Gustav. But the thing about the way a recoilless rifle works is the reason that they are recoilless, or have very low recoil, is because when the projectile leaves the front, you get a sudden great big back blast that comes out the back. Now, this isn't necessarily different than how a rocket launcher would work, or at least, in effect, it's not all that different, because when a rocket launcher, you have the rocket motor, it's propelling the rocket out the front, you're also going to have a back blast that's coming out the back. But the problem, and this goes for rocket launchers as well, not all of them, but some. The problem is that you cannot fire this in a confined space. If you stand behind a recoilless rifle when it fires, it will absolutely kill you. And the lethal range is apparently pretty large for even relatively small recoilless rifles. And this obviously translates to a confined building. Like, if you have a wall behind you, that wall is going to reflect all that blast pressure right back onto you. It's going to kill you if you try and fire one indoors. CS specifically stands for confined space, meaning that you can, in fact, fire it indoors, and it's not going to kill you. I believe it has something to do with water. Like, there's water in the back of it, if memory serves, and that does something to the blast wave that prevents it from killing everyone inside the room when it's fired. Anyway. Green Beret Flash. The M1014 is now considered a secondary weapon. An additional HK416 in the main slot, and the M1014 added to the second slot. Which, the problem I had with using this as an example was because the game is treating this like a launcher rather than like a rifle. So, effectively, this guy, you can make an argument, is really no different than something like this guy, who has both the AT4 and the rifle. So, I was a little bit hesitant to make that comparison between a primary and a secondary slot. Then again, saying that these launchers could be in the secondary slots they're talking about. And then That is the Baltic Battalion door-kicking special forces, if memory serves. These guys, yes it is, and they get one more Aton law, which, if memory serves, is a specifically CQC variant of the law. And so that's just like a suckier version of the SRA. Okay. Weaponry supply cost adjusted. So underbarrel grenade launchers supply cost goes down from 1.5 to 0.5. Is that really? Yeah. Okay. Light anti-tanks go from 30 to 25. The Melts, the Dragon 3, and the Kokon go from 50 to 60 to 100 kilograms. The Cornet and the Javelin go from 75 to 150. The Hellfire, the Javelin Lightweight, Clue, and the Spike go from 100 to 150. So you're basically, all of your infantry squads, except for your dedicated ATGM teams, are going to require less supplies, but your dedicated ATGM teams are going to require more supplies. Availability limits have been adjusted for VDV snipers. Those guys, PDSS, regular snipers have gone down to 2. Spetsnaz, VDV Spetsnaz goes down to 2. Spetsnaz GRU, or VDV Spetsnaz goes down to 3. Spetsnaz GRU goes down to 2. Spetsnaz VMF goes down to 2. Spetsnaz VMF, those are... Hang on. Spetsnaz VMF is... Yeah, it's these guys with this loadout. Okay. VDV Razvedka goes down from 6 to... You had 6 of these guys as an option? VDV Dishka and Naval... Hang on. Did you really have 6 of them? Yes, this just goes to show you how little I do anything with Russia. Did you have 6? You have 6. Huh. Okay. I did not know that you had 6. VDV Dishka and Naval Infantry go down to 6, which is kind of fair because both VDV... Those two were particularly strong. I know that VDV Dishka could be kind of used like a miniature Moz team, because if memory serves, they have 2 launchers. And the launchers, no, they're not great, but they don't suck. So... And then you had... it was Naval Infantry. Which, Naval Infantry is generally considered pretty good as well. I suspect because they also have these launchers. And, to be fair, the VDV and Naval Infantry, like, in real life, is generally pretty good infantry that Russia has. And it's telling that for several years they have basically been fire brigaded around Ukraine to try and shore up the front line whenever stuff happens. Guard Mostostreliki goes down to 6. Gonostreliki, basically mountain infantry, goes down to 4. Guard Sturmoviki, Fire Guys, and the RPG-29 go down to 3. Okay. The SSO and Cherry Berries go down to 2. VDV Cornet, PTRK Cornet, PTRK Conkers, and PTRK Faggot go down to 2. VDV Melts and PTO Melts go down to 2. All the sniper teams go down to 2. Forcon, Pararescue, RRC, and the SE Scouts go down to 3. Green Berets go down to 2. Mech Riflemen go up to 8. Troopers AT go down to 4. Rangers go down to 4 from 8. Baltic Line Infantry go down to 6. The Reservists go down to 6 as well. Assaultmen, Mech Engineers, Combat Engineers, and Raws go down to 3. Delta Force goes down to 2, which makes sense because they did kind of bring the Russian Special Forces down. And it's worth noting that Marine Raiders was already at 2, so that's why they aren't being changed. Cat Tow, Cat Dragon, Tow 2A, Weapons Squad, and Milan go down to 2, which kind of sucks because Weapons Squad goes down to 2. Ranger Javelin goes down to 3. Cav Scouts go down to 3 as well. And then they've adjusted the prices. Oh, they've nerfed the price of Guard Muscle Streliki. I did not notice that last time. I think that's pretty good. And they've nerfed the price of the Ambushers. Okay. They've unified the price for SSO. Spetsnaz VMF. They've brought the price down for the fire support, which is nice because people might actually use it now. Increase the price for most of Streliki. Okay. Force Recon goes up slightly. Marines goes down. Which, if they give the M27 a 600 meter range, Marines is going to be very dumb. Awesome, but very dumb. Marine Raiders also goes down. Assaultmen. Okay, that's not too bad. Maybe people actually use the straw more. This is actually really nice. And the Cat Tows. Mech Riflemen gets slightly more expensive. Mech Engineers get slightly more expensive. Green Berets goes down slightly. Delta also goes down. Baltic Infantry. And I noticed that they've raised the price for some of the reservists, which kind of makes sense, but it's also a little bit of a pest because I like the idea of having cheap reservist units. I mean, even then, they're still pretty cheap. Weapon platforms have been adjusted. Base damage increase. Are they talking about all 5.45s and all 7.62s? .45 is like the AN-74. It's 7. Okay, I would like a little bit more clarity on what that means. The Mark 48 and the KAC AMG, minimum distance removed so they can be used in buildings. The PKP Bullpup, the Mark 48, the KAC, and the Mini-Me has had their aim time increased. The SV98, the M40A5, the M210 can now shoot out to 1,000 meters. The Mark 22 and the T5000 can now shoot out to 1,100 meters. All under-broken launchers have their range standardized to 400. All DMR base tier reworked. The regular Melts has had its range bumped up, so it's not quite as sucky. The Melts M and the Dragon have also had their range bumped up, which is kind of nice. The SPG-9 has had its aim time slightly reduced. The RPG-29 has had its reload time reduced. The SRAW has its aim time reduced, and the Poron had its base damage reduced. Alright. So, if I'm going to be entirely honest, I like some of these infantry changes. Like, I like the price changes. One thing I'm not a fan of, however, is adjusting the availability of some of them. I mean, I get that they're probably trying to reduce the amount of ATGMs, but I don't know. At least I assume that they're trying to reduce the amount of ATGMs, because I don't know why else they would absolutely sledgehammer the availability for things like these guys and these guys. So I'm not entirely sure why they would sledgehammer them so hard if they aren't trying to reduce the availability of ATGMs. Rangers also, I'm not entirely sure if Rangers needed to be sledgehammered that hard. So I mean, maybe dropping it to 6, but 4 seems a little bit, I don't know. Also, it's interesting that they did not quite sledgehammer Ranger Javelin as hard as they sledgehammered everything else. Aside from that, I can't really think of any changes here that I necessarily disagree with. I think the VDV Igla ammunition buff is nice. One thing I do kind of wish they would do is give Guard, give Guard Mosostreliki. Where are they, for that matter? There it is. Give them 8 armor instead of just 6. I think that would help. SSO, PDSS. But they are bringing the price down, which is nice. Where's the price? To 70. They're not bringing the price down for everything. Green Berets. Huh. Anyway, I still wish that they would add the anti-armor version of the straw. All they would have to do is just where is here it is. All they would have to do is just take this, make it top attack. That's all they would have to do. With that 140mm pen, just make it top attack, and you're going to be dealing with something that could take out most tanks in 2 hits. Yes. Infantry. I need Marine Corps. Here we go. And then I need these straw. Grab these straw. Damage calculations. A target heat armor of 120 with 19 health. And congratulations, you're going to be killing it in 3 hits. You're going to be killing most tanks in 3 hits. And the reason why I find this very interesting is because you have 8 launchers. And because they're disposable launchers, they can't be used while moving. Well, I suppose that's fair. But since they're disposable launchers, you're going to be cycling through them pretty fast. So I'm not entirely sure how many of them are going to be caught by APS. I'm not saying that you're necessarily going to turn them into, like, a slightly cheaper, slightly suckier Ranger Moz, but you could potentially do some pretty interesting work with them. And, okay, just give us the upgrade option for 40 points. Bring the squad price to 110. Or heck, even You don't even need to do that. Ranger Maz is already 100 points, and Ranger Maz would be better because, yes, it's not top attack, but you have a lot of launchers that you can cycle through with Ranger Maz. So maybe 100 points? Granted, I think if you were to give the Sraw the top attack, it would be killing things a lot faster than Ranger Maz. So 100 points. Yeah, okay, I could kind of see an argument for 110 when you realize that it's going to be killing things a lot faster. Anyway, vehicles. Added a new system with transferring 50% of the stress damage from vehicles to dismounts. Guaranteed panic state when auto-dropped from a destroyed transport. Added a new supply ability for infantry-bound transports with the following pattern. 250 kilogram APCs with high seat capacity or autocannons, ATGMs and IFVs, the BTR-MDM, the BTR-RD, the Striker Dragoon, the BMP-3, the AMPV. With basic kit, the B-10, the BTR-D, M1126, M113A3. Specialized vehicles. I think that's supposed to be the M1126 ESV. Okay, so does that mean that they're going to supply, that the infantry is going to resupply when they're in the vehicle? And that the vehicle is going to have a certain amount of supplies set aside, and then they're going to resupply as they're inside the vehicle? Don't know. That could be interesting. And then we have an anti-overkill system. I cannot read this language, but if we scroll down, we find a language I can read. Probability of kill parameters introduced. Calculations based on damage and hit probability of incoming missiles and attacking weapons. Explanation. Prior to this chance, anti-overkill is calculated by simply multiplying damage and hit probability, then summing up resulting values for all incoming threats. Once that sum exceeds target's current HP, target was marked as overkilled, which prevented new missiles from being launched. Excuse me. And getting lowest priority in the new target searches. Or on new target searches. But that approach appeared to be incorrect against targets with high mischance, planes with high ECM value and flares, as in some cases, actual chance to kill overkill targets was no more than 60%. Calculating probability of kill allows to spend just enough ammunition on predictable targets while sending waves of missiles against high random targets like planes. Attention, as kill probability threshold still requires fine-tuning, we ask you to give us your feedback on how SAMs behave. Too many, okay, too few. One-shot targets are prioritized during new target search. Active APS is now handled differently by anti-overkill. So this didn't just apply to a this didn't just apply to SAMs. First incoming interceptable missile or ready-to-shoot weapon with interceptable ammunition will be ignored. Previously, APS simply multiplied current health by certain value, which led to the incorrect results against targets on low HP. Improved interactions between guided and non-guided weapons. Unguided weapons are ignored by guided weapons against planes, but still split targets among other unguided weapons. Not entirely sure what that means. Time to intercept parameter introduced. It is calculated during target search by summing up the time to turn plus time to aim plus projectile travel time, and if two targets have the same economical value, damage presumably related to target cost, then one with the lower time to intercept is selected. It is also possible in some cases for target to be switched to a quicker weapon. A time to target parameter introduced. It is calculated for all targetable projectiles and most notably during seed missile interception. Even if a missile targeting SAM A is attacked by another weapon or even has interceptor missile incoming, but its time to target is lowered, then times to intercept on interceptors, then targeted SAM will automatically override overkill and try to self-defend. So, from my understanding, if you have a SAM A and SAM B, and a plane fires a seed missile at SAM A, but SAM B fires a missile to try and intercept that seed missile, SAM A is going to look at it and it's going to fire its own missile anyway. Particularly if the seed missile is closer to SAM A. That, from my understanding, is what that means. I could very much be wrong. Improved kinematic target evaluation. If a missile tries to switch to a new target, then it first checks if it's able to turn fast enough to intercept that target. Fixed various bugs, which result in cross-blocking of weapons, denial of shoot even on priority targets, and many more. Okay, I assume that's what all that means. Added a main priority interception for AA system seed self-defense. So, is that just like in the code, or is that something that we can select? It'd be kind of interesting if it's something that we could select. Because I was under the impression that anti-aircraft systems would automatically prioritize seed missiles above all else. Anyway. Personally, I think the whole thing about anti-overkill could be solved if the game just gave us the ability to select how many missiles we want to fire at a given target. Like, up to a certain limit, so you couldn't just tell the launcher, dump everything you have at one plane, but maybe for missiles with, or launchers with 4 missiles, you could select up to 2. 6 missiles, you could select up to 2. 8 missiles, you could select maybe up to 3. Like, launchers with missiles between 2 to 8, you could select up to 3, or 2, and then from like 8, or I suppose maybe 9 to 12, you could select 3, and then from 12 or more, or for 13 or more, you could select 4. Granted, I don't necessarily know why you would need to fire 4 missiles at any given aircraft, unless potentially you're talking about something like a MML trying to shoot down a 30 hit point plane like an IL-76. Because you would need 3 missiles to do that. Because an IL-76 has 30 health, and an MML with these, where is the mouse? Where is the mouse? That is a great question. Where is the mouse? There's the mouse. Because an IL-76 has, if memory serves, 30 health. Where's the IL-76? There's the IL-76. The IL-76 has 30 health. The MML with stingers does, or not stingers, but sidewinders do 14 damage, I want to say. 13 damage. So you would need 3 missiles in order to bring down an IL-76. That is assuming none of them get spoofed by things like flares. In fact, if you were talking about stingers, then you would literally need all 4 missiles, assuming they don't get spoofed by flares. So, I guess there is a reason for it, but you would need like a lot. Something more than 12 missiles. Like a launcher with more than 12 missiles to be able to select 4 missiles to fire at any given target. And now that I think about it, I think the only SAMs that have that can mount them more than 12 missiles, I think, is the MML and the PAC-3. Because the PAC-3 can mount 16, the MML can mount 15. Okay. I think it's just the Pack 3 and the MML. Anyway. But still, I think that if you just allowed us to select the number of missiles fired at a target, and I know that some SAMs have the ability can fire 2 missiles per target, but what I mean is like fire 2 missiles regardless of the amount of target's health. Like take a pack 2 and fire 2 missiles at pretty much anything. Basically ripple fire them. Fire one and then fire the other one a second later. I think that could fix the overkill system quite easily. And if you set it to a player function where you can set this figure either dynamically or maybe when you're deck building, then that wouldn't be that bad. Because I understand why they added the anti-overkill system, so you don't waste ammunition on targets. The problem is that, well, the problems are evident. However, if you give the option to, or if you give the player the option of selecting how many missiles that they want their unit to fire, then the player is selecting that. So it's not like the player can get mad over wasting ammunition when they've literally told the launcher to waste ammunition to make sure the target is dead. Or to fire X amount of ammunition to make sure the target is dead. Because, like, if I'm shooting at, if I have a Pack 3 set to fire 4 missiles at one target, and it's shooting at a plane that has 20 health, and it kills it with the first 2 missiles, I can't get mad that the other 2 missiles are wasted because I told it to fire 4 missiles. That's what I'm trying to get at. Long and medium range SAMs, low altitude radar bonus has been reduced from 1.25 to 1. So now, I assume that's their vision bonus? I'm not sure. Long and medium range SAM's range has been reduced by approximately 1/3. I don't like that change. I'm going to be entirely honest. SAMs with vertical launch now have significantly faster starting missile ammunition or animation. That was probably necessary. But I don't like the range change, to be entirely honest, because is that the range, like the missile range, or how far the radar can see? Because if that's the missile range, that's nowhere near as bad. But if that's how far the radar can see, that's going to make stealth aircraft even worse. Low altitude radar bonus multiplier has been reduced. That isn't really going to affect anything except for cruise missiles. But no stealth aircraft can deploy missiles at low altitude. Although it could make low altitude bombers kind of fun. Short distance SAMs and self-propelled anti-aircraft guns, high altitude radar bonus multiplier has been reduced from 2 to 1. So again, is that range or vision? I mean, I assume both. Short range SAMs and SPAAG's turret rotation speed has been significantly increased. High altitude range has been reduced for most of the short distance SAMs and SPAAGs. Would like a little bit more clarity on that. I assume when they say short distance SAMs, they're talking about SHORAD systems. So things like the Avenger, the Slam Ram, both. Well, yeah, the Avenger, the Slam Ram, the NASAMs without the AMRAAM ERs, or the Pantsir, or things like that. I don't know. I'm not sold on that, because that could make aircraft a lot more powerful. And I thought one of the reasons that they were doing this was to try and make aircraft less powerful. So, I don't know. Stealth value has been increased from 1.25 to 1.5 for the following vehicles. The 1V119, the PRP-5G, which I believe is the That's the version of the BRM-1K, I believe. Where's the BRM-1K? There it is. No, that's the PRP-4A. Okay, so this is actually the version of this then. Yeah. Okay, so that goes down to 1.5. Stealth. The 1V14, the PRP-5K Mars, which is the one on the BRDM-3, the PRP-4A, the M981A3 Fist V, the M1025 Humvee LRAS, the Armored Knight, or the Striker RV. Okay. Stealth value has been reduced down to 1 for the Typhoon VDV, the BRM-3K, RYS. I assume basically everything from, like, these three are just 1, but that's 1.5. LAV-25A1, the A2 CFE Bradley, the A3 CFE Bradley, the Bradley, the B-Fist, the Striker RV SLEP, SELP, which I don't think... Where is... There it is. I don't think it's actually called SLEP. Nope. Yep, it is. Okay. So I'm assuming it's 1.5 if you take any of these options. And then it goes down to 1 when you take those. The RSOV, the Flyer GMV, the Scimitar, the Spartan, and the VMLK. Or VMIK. Not sure which. I mean, that's kind of fair. They're nerfing the price for the stealth for the transports. One thing I find kind of interesting that I'm not seeing here are vehicles like the Humvee GMV, the Humvee RWS, and things like that. I'm also not seeing either of the tanks, which is kind of interesting. Weapon parameters have been adjusted. All SAM's base damage capped at 19. Okay. Long and medium range SAM's aim time has been reduced. 100 to 125mm APFS DS rounds damage has been increased to 10. Interesting. Interesting. Let me think. Because I talked about this in another video, but what I believe the way that they've calculated but I believe the way that they calculated the damage for tank guns was a divisor based on the gun's millimeter. And I think that that divisor was 20. So if we have a 120mm tank gun that is divided by 20, we get 6. And if we look at the 100mm Rapara divided by 20, we get 5. Now, this isn't a clean comparison because the 105s on the M8, the Booker, the M60, and the MGS divided by 20 would be 5.25 instead of 5.5. So there is some rounding going on. And another example is the 125mm guns on a lot of Russian tanks. They don't use 120s, they use 125s. This should be 6.25. Now, I had thought about this thinking in the context of, or I mentioned this thinking in the context of things like 100mm or 115mm guns, like the 115mm gun on the T62, I believe, 115 millimeter gun divided by 20 is 5.75, I believe. Yes. And if you wanted to go with bigger guns, like for example the 130 millimeter Rheinmetall RH-130, that should be a damage value of 6.5. Or if you wanted to look at the 140 millimeter guns that the US, the Germans, or I think it was the Swiss? It was either the Swiss or the Swedes toyed with towards the end of the Cold War, that would be a damage value of 7. Or if you want to look at the, because apparently supposedly there's supposed to be an option to outfit the T-14 with 152 millimeter tank gun. Honestly, I don't think that's true, but one thing I do know is true is that in the late 1980s, the Soviets toyed with developing tanks with 152 millimeter tank guns. That divided by 20 would be 7.6, which would nuts. That divided by, come on, thank you. That divided by 20 would divide by 20 is 7.6, or maybe 7.5 rounded down. But here the value goes from 6 to 10. And down here, the 100 to 105 millimeter APFSDS damage values goes from 5 or 5.5 to 8.5. Where's the mouse? There's the mouse. Now, if we run this into a calculator, 120 divided by 12 is 10. 125 divided by 12 is 10.41, which can be rounded down to 10. 100 divided by 12 is 8.3, which can be rounded up to 8.5. 105 divided by 12 is 8.75, which can be rounded down to 8.5. Now, assuming we take all those gun calibers that I previously mentioned, 115, 130, 140, and 152, and we run them through this calculation, I think this could be interesting. Because I do not at all think the game is going to be limited to just 120 or 125 millimeter guns. I think it'd be interesting to see the likes of the RH-130. So a 115 millimeter gun divided by 12 is going to be 9.5, which I suppose, or just over 9.5, which I suppose could be rounded down to 90, or to 9.5. And for that matter, a 90 millimeter gun, because a 90 millimeter gun using the old damage calculations would have been 4.5 damage. Now that's going to be doing 7.5. So that could be kind of interesting. A 130 millimeter gun divided by 12 is 10.8. So maybe round that down to like 10.75. Or even just round it up to 11. A 140 millimeter gun divided by 12 is, you could probably round that down to like 11.5. And then a 152 millimeter gun divided by 12, you could probably round that down to like 12.5. Okay. 100, 120. Where's the mouse? There's the mouse. Heat base damage increased from 12 to 13. No. Heat damage increased from 9 to 10 to 11. 125mm AHE, base damage increased from 12 to 13. 125mm ATGM. I wonder, it says 125mm HE. So does that mean that 120mm HE stays at 12? 125mm ATGM's base damage increased to 11. The M830A18 heat multi-purpose round has the damage increased from 10 to 11.5. And the Sokol 5 ATGM has the damage increased from 9.5 to 10.5. The Sokol V is... I believe that's the one used on the T14. It's the Sprinter. Actually, no, is it? Or no, I think that's the top attack one. Yeah, that's the Sprinter. Yeah, here we go. It is the top attack one. Okay. It's also terminal guided, isn't it? Yeah, it is terminal guided. That's semi-active. 100 and 105mm APFSDS base damage, or damage increased to 8.5, as I already mentioned. 100mm 3 BK16M heat increased to 9.5. Now, there's only one vehicle in a game, or in the game, that has a 100mm gun. And that is this thing. So I'm assuming they're talking about the heat round on this thing. Vehicle-based medium machine guns and heavy machine guns and miniguns aim time reduced. AA guns, autocannons, vehicle-based grenade launchers aim time reduced. AA guns high altitude range reduced and capped at 1 kilometer. Tank gun aim time reduced. Tank gun dispersion reduced. 75% chance to hit a target at max distance. Gun launched ATGM's aim time reduced, which is actually faster than regular tank gun aim time, I'd like to point out. All infantry and vehicle-based ATGMs, with the exception of terminal guided missiles, aim time has been standardized at 1 to 2 seconds. Okay, so it might be standardized with this and not this. The T14, the 2A82 has a faster reload, 6 to 7, 5.6. The UAZ, the SPG-9 has a slightly faster aim time. The Shilka, the non-radar variant, the dispersion has been reduced. The BMP-1 and the BRM-1K, the Grom range has been increased to 1,000, which I guess that makes a lot of sense because the SPG-9 uses the same ammunition that the Grom does, and that has a 1,000 meter range. The BTO, the RPOA aim time increase or reduced. The BTO. That is... Yeah, that's that thing. I was thinking of this. E1 gets 2 smoke charges. CV9035, kinetic and heat bonus protection from up armor reduced from 180 to 150. I really do not want this to sound like I'm tooting my own horn, but I absolutely called that. And I think I even mentioned that it was 150 when I suggested the figure that they were going to reduce it to. And there's a reason why I think 150. Because if I go to vehicle and I find this, and you go to the 2A42, and you look at the pen values, because with the kinetic armor of 180, you're not penetrating that at any range less or greater than 200. you have to get within 200 meters, which is suicidally close in this game to actually punch through it. And even then, you're doing basically scratch damage. Meanwhile, if I were to select something like actually open that up. Something like a Bradley, and we were to look at the Bushmaster with the same armor protection and the same target health, you could just barely scratch the armor at 500 meters with a Bushmaster. With a Bushmaster 2, I think you have to get within 800 meters to I think you have to get within 800 meters to actually penetrate the armor. Yeah, 800, but 801 you're not punching through. But with a value of 150, if we take this and we reduce the value to 150, this is going to increase the penetration to, I believe it's 500 meters for, yeah, it's 500 meters for a 100 to 50 millimeter pen range. I think it was 750 for a 120 to 60 millimeter pen range. Oh no. Oh heck no. Yeah. And then these, I think, would be penetrating the armor out to maximum range, but doing absolute scratch damage in the process. Yeah. And even then, I'd like to point out, you're still punching through the armor, but you're using a lot of ammunition to actually kill the target. Like, a Bushmaster at 600 meters is using 54 rounds to actually punch through the target's armor. At this rate of fire, that's upwards of a minute of firing at it. So, the TGB, the aim time for the recoilless rifle has been reduced. The Unimog with the Menstrual, the base damage on the Menstrual has been slightly reduced as well. The Sprut SDM is now more expensive. The T15, they've cut the price down on the Kinsel module, which is, I suppose that's fair. They've cut the base price down on the BMPT-72, and then they've increased the price of the M8 Thunderbolt. Boo! Etc. I'm trying to think, what is the M8 Thunderbolt, what is the... So that's like 60 points. So that's 190 points for this thing fully kitted out. Okay. Alright, that's not too bad. T15, yeah, the T15 could probably use that. Terminator could also probably use that. Anyway, on to support. Artillery salvo length icons now display the exact number of shells fired. Excuse me. Added a new auto-fire ability for the 2S41, the 2K32, the 2K21, and the LAV-M. Those specifically are all 82mm mortars. Minimal MLRS dispersion has been increased. At 0 meters, dispersion will be half at of the max at full distance. Okay. Howitzers and MLRS range has been increased by an additional 500 meters. Direct fire shells on artillery and mortars follow tank guns' aim time patterns, separated and increased. Ability limits for all mortar systems has been reduced to 3, or availability limits for all mortar systems has been reduced to 3. Added a new internal subclassification for all tube systems. I assume they say tube, which makes me think tube artillery, but they have this laid out here in a way that I'm not sure is correct, and I'll explain what I mean in a second here. Long-range artillery has a maximum of 2, and the fire mission length is either 1 round, 2 rounds, or 3 rounds. Multi-purpose artillery has a maximum of 3, and the fire mission length is either 3 rounds, 6 rounds, or 9 rounds. And then they have a conventional artillery. And you can get a maximum of 4. And a fire mission length is either a fourth of their ammunition, a half of their ammunition, or all of their ammunition. And the only thing that makes sense to me is if conventional artillery is referring to MRLs, like the Smerch, the Grad, the M270, or HIMARS. Because that's the only thing that I can think of that makes sense for the fire mission length, ammunition costs, to actually make sense. Because otherwise you'd have like a 2S3 firing 40 rounds continuously. And unless, I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying you can't have that. It doesn't make much sense to me, because they would be conducting that fire mission for a very long time. Even if it's only a quarter of the ammunition. How many rounds does a 2S3 have? A 2S3 has like 25. Oh, yeah, a quarter is going to be 6. Okay. What about a 2S19? Where's the 2S19? There's the 2S19. 35. So a quarter of that's going to be like 9, 8. Somewhere around there. That's going to be 8. Though it's going to be like 8 for the short burst, 16 for the medium range, or for the medium duration, or all 32 for the long duration. That doesn't make sense to me. It only makes sense if we're talking about things like multiple rocket launchers. Tier 1 artillery. There it is. The Coalitia cluster, the cluster loadout has been removed. Smoke shells removed from both loadouts. So we either get 70 HE or 50 rocket-assisted HE and 20 guided. The 2S7 shell dispersion for both loadouts has been reduced, so it's a lot more accurate. That can make the 2S7 fun. The M109A7, the rocket-assisted shells have been removed, so it's either just the PGM or the smoke. Presumably the PGM still fires out to 4,300 meters? I'll have to check next week. The Brutus, default HE, smoke, and cluster munitions loadouts removed. Add an extended range loadout as default with 18 rocket-assisted rounds. So presumably we're going to have the rocket-assisted or the guided. The PZH 2000, smoke shells removed from default loadout, cluster munition loadout replaced with a new extended range loadout with either 60 HE or 60 HE rocket-assisted. Tier 2 artillery. The Mazda S, HE shells removed from default variant loadout. So it's either 35 cluster and 15 smoke, or I assume we're going to keep this, but I assume this is just going to be 35 cluster, 15 smoke, and then we're going to get 32 HE, 12 smoke, and 16 guided, or 6 guided rather. The 2S5, add to the Krasnopola for the loadout, so we get 5 HE rocket assisted or 25 rocket assisted HE and 5 PGM. The A6 Paladin, the Copperhead removed from cluster and added to default HE munitions loadout instead of Excalibur. So we have an option between 21 default HE, 9 smoke, and 6 guided, or 12 cluster, or 24 cluster and 12 smoke. This one is kind of interesting to me because Copperhead is not exactly a guided artillery shell. So Excalibur is basically it's like regular artillery shell, it's just guided. Like, it's very accurate if you're lasing the target. Copperhead does not work that way. It has lower damage, but it has much higher pen. If you are lasing a vehicle specifically, Copperhead is going to be very, very effective. Excalibur is going to be more effective against general targets. Copperhead is going to be much more effective against vehicles. So that is kind of interesting. The K9 ammo ratio slightly adjusted. 33 HE, 15 smoke, or 30 HE, 12 smoke, and 6 PGM. What is the ratio currently? K9. Okay, so they just added 3 smoke rounds at the expense of 3 HE rounds. 3396. And again, they've just added 3 more smoke rounds at the expense of 3 HE rounds. Okay. Tier 3 artillery, 2S1. I mean, I suppose conventional artillery could be... I don't know. Aim time reduced. 2S1M. Is that for heat rounds? Because it doesn't have... Where is the 2S1? 2S1 aim time. So are they talking about the reload time instead of the aim time? I think they're talking about the reload time. Smoke shells removed from default variant, so it's just 30 HE and then 10 heat. 2S34 Halsta, weapon system redesigned as a mortar with mortar rules, guided shells removed, 25 HE, 15 smoke. The Bereg, the interaction of artillery and anti-air ammunition has been improved. Second weapon removed, SPAAG mode. So I assume the gun is going to have 2 separate modes. It's just not going to be like this if you have the multi-purpose loadout selected. AA aim time reduced, dispersion reduced, high altitude range increased. Which is interesting because this thing cannot engage aircraft. And aircraft are the only thing that flies a high altitude. So unless this thing is going to get the ability to engage aircraft, which could be kind of fun, or maybe not fun, but kind of funny, and like it's almost like a World War II era flak gun, but still. I mean, these gun systems can engage aircraft. The 5-inch gun on the Arleigh Burke in the scenario editor can engage aircraft. So I don't see why they couldn't give the Bereg that ability. The Acacia, HE shells, and defaulted smoke shells in the M2 variant are removed. So it's just 30-10 smoke and heat in the M1 variant, I assume, and 30 and 10 HE and heat in the M2 variant. No change to the Hawkeye. The Striker SPH mixing shells in different types removed from both loadouts, high explosive, and smoke. So it's either just 56 HE or 56 smoke. The A5 Paladin, same thing, so it's just 36 HE or 36 smoke. Small caliber mortars, mostly high explosive munitions replaced with a now fully high explosive. That's not changed. Heat shells added to loadout instead of smoke. 2K21. So, is that like a direct fire? I don't know if that means that this thing can direct fire or not. And the LEVM has not changed. High caliber mortars, the 2S9. So, 24 cluster and 4 heat. The Nona SM gets... Ooh, excuse me. 30 HE rocket assisted, 5 smoke, and 5 PGM. The 2S31 Havana. The default ammunition loadout slightly adjusted. 45, 15, 10 versus what is it in the regular game? That's coastal. Or no, it's not coastal, it's this. This. 40, 21, 9. So you give up 45, 15, 10. So you give up 6 smoke rounds for 1 extra heat round and 5 extra HE rounds. Heat shells added to extended range loadout instead of HE and smoke. So it's just guided rounds or heat. Okay. And I assume heat is literally direct fire heat. Which actually is a pretty solid range, all things considered. The 2S33 Nona moved from coastal troops to motorized. HE shells from default smoke from extended range removed. So it's either just 29 HE and or 21 or 9 HE and smoke, or 21 9 rocket assisted HE and PGM. Moving it to motorized is kind of interesting, because coastal already has its own mortar. But one question I have is the vehicle going to get its speed increased to match the BTR-82s is the vehicle going to get its speed increased to match the BTR-82s from motorized? Or is it still going to remain slow like the BTR-80s from coastal? And this also goes into the armor package, because the armor package reduces the speed even further, but the armor package on this does not. So it's worth noting that the 2S23 has the same problem with the speed reduction. The 2S39 removed from cluster, and smoke shells removed from both. So you either get HE and precision guided or just a crap ton of cluster. Did the guided round remain the same? Huh, it did. Okay. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's the same. Yeah, it's the same. 2S12, smoke shells removed, so it's just 60 HE. The 2S4, the aim time has been increased. That's kind of fair. I mean, it's a soldering great big round. And the 2S4 was kind of good, so I can see slightly reining it in a bit. The Dragonfire, new Rocket-assisted rounds and guided rounds with a 2,400-meter range. Ooh, that could be fun. Added to loadout instead of base HE and smoke. Okay, so that could be fun. That's the only U.S. mortar that would actually be able to do that. M1064, mostly high explosive. Loadout replaced with a new mixed loadout of HE and shell. And HE shells removed from second loadout. So it's either just half and half HE smoke or just full-on smoke. M1287, all loadouts are completely rearranged with high explosive guided and multi-purpose. So either 69 HE, 70 PGM, or a combination thereof. I'm not sure where they stuck the extra precision guided round, and more importantly, I don't know where they could stick that. They couldn't stick just an extra regular HE mortar round, but the ammunition loadouts are different. Or the ammunition carried is different. The Grad. And they're increasing the dispersion. But the delay between firing is going down. So I assume they're going to be slinging the rockets faster. I mean, the Grad's always been a bit of a shotgun. But it looks like they're going to be slinging the rockets faster. And they're increasing the range for ground-based ballistic missiles. Okay. And they're slightly reducing the damage for the meteorite and basically any Miklik, which is kind of interesting when you think about that damage threshold that they mentioned earlier was 38, and they're reducing this from 38 to 35. Dispersion pattern standardized for all guided shells is 160 to 120. What's that for, like... Was it 160, 120 before? Yeah, 160 to 120. 200 to 150. Where's the Koalitzia? Koalitzia. 160 to 120. Okay. So I assume that's technically a slight buff to the Iron Thunder. Top tier HE and RAP. Slightly reduced the dispersion. Other 152 to 155. 280 to 210. And that's 240 to 180. It's interesting that doesn't include the Striker SPH. Or the Hawkeye. So I wonder where the Hawkeye and Striker SPH are going to fall into these. If we're going by what they said up here, I assume they're going to be considered tier 3, which I guess could be considered this one? I don't know. I honestly don't know. I am purely speculating here. But it's worth noting that the dispersion for the Hawkeye and the SPH are less than what everything else is. That's 200 to 150, and I believe the SPH is also 200 to 150. Yes. I still wish we had the option of mounting 105. Like the 105, or not 105, the 155 in the SPH. Just give it the stats for the Brutus's 155 with the basic HE. Artillery resupply time per one shell standardized. 105 to 130 is now 6 seconds. 152 to 155 is now 8. 152 to 155 guided is now 10. 203 to 240 is now 12. And then 203 to 240 guided is now 14, which I think only affects the laser guided round on the Tupon. Ammo resupply time per one missile standardized for the Smirch and the Tornado S, so 8 minutes for a full reload. The TOS-1A is 8 minutes for, I assume, 24. This is supposed to be 24, so 8 minutes for a full reload. The TOS-1, 6 minutes for a full reload. The Grad, 6 minutes for a full reload. The Tochka-U, 2 minutes for a full reload. Iskander M, 4 minutes for a full reload. The Iskander K, 3 minutes 20 seconds for 2 missiles, or 6 minutes 40 for 4 of them. The M270s, 8 minutes for a full reload. The HIMARS, 4 minutes for a full reload. Cat fee is 6 minutes for a full reload, and ATACMS and Prism is 4 minutes for 2, 8 minutes for 4. Which is on par with the Iskander. And M142 is 2 minutes. Okay. This is for the HIMARS. This is for the M270. You know, it occurs to me that if they're trying to bring artillery, if they're trying to rein in artillery, this is interesting because one thing that they may end up doing is by doing these changes, you're making artillery more vulnerable, because the longer the artillery has to spend resupplying, the more likely it's going to be found and attacked and destroyed along with the supply point. Prices have been adjusted. The 2S41 is going to be 40 for the HE, or for the HE, 45 for the mostly smoke. Is 2S41 really? Huh. Okay. The 2S9 is getting more expensive. The 2S9 M1 is also getting slightly more expensive. The Vena, okay. Koalitzia is getting very expensive. The Mazda SM, that's not too bad. The TOS, they're actually nerfing the price on the TOS. Or lowering the price on the TOS, rather. 2S33. Okay. And they're bringing the price down of the Grad. 2S39, extended range or cluster. 2SM1, the Hosta, that's just getting cheaper in general. The A222 is getting cheaper in general. 2K32 are getting very cheap. And the 2S5 is getting a lot more expensive. As is the 2S7. The LAV-M is getting cheaper. The Dragonfire is also getting cheaper. The M1064. Okay. And the A6 Paladin. The A7 Paladin is getting very expensive, as is the Iron Thunder. The Hawkeye is getting slightly more expensive. The Brutus... okay. I wonder if the guided shells are also going to be extended ranged. Or if you're going to have to pick between longer range shells but without guidance, or shorter range shells but with guidance. Striker Mortar Carrier. Okay, that's not too bad. Striker SPH. Gets a little bit cheaper. That's nice. The M113... the Baltic M113 Mortar. That's not too bad. That's nice. And then the A5 Paladin. The K9 gets very expensive, as is the PCH. So they're making artillery a lot more expensive, which that makes a degree of sense, but I don't know. I kind of don't want them to limit the number of small artillery systems, like the Hawkeye or the 2S1. Larger artillery systems I can understand, but I don't know. I kind of like the idea of having a larger number of relatively small caliber guns. Helicopter's agility, acceleration, and turn rate at high speed or low altitude has been significantly increased. I wonder if that's going to make them less drifty when you try and control them. The MH6 HP has been reduced to 6, which means that it can now be one shot by any man pads, I'd like to point out. The Comanche, I'm guessing that just means that the price for the basic rockets are going to go up. So, presumably, the price of the Comanche is going to go up by 30 points. But the, where's the Comanche? There's the Comanche. So the price is going to go to like 170. But that's going to go down to 20, and that's going to go down to 30. I assume. Resupply time for heli-based seed and cruise missiles increased. Okay. Which is kind of funny, because you only can fire 2 missiles, but alright. Weapon parameters have been adjusted for heli-based ATGMs, have had their reload times reduced, and the Lemur, that thing has had its speed increased. And okay, so the prices have been brought down slightly. That's not too bad. I like that. MI-28, MI-24, MI-24. Especially seeing as some of the Russian helicopters could get kind of expensive. Oh, they slightly upped the price on the Kiowa. And on the Guardian. Okay. Is that right? 110? Where's the Guardian? Guardian. 15. 30. Yeah. Okay, so that'd be 145. They really brought the price down on the Super Cobra. That's nice. And they brought the price down on the Ospreys, I'd like to point out. Although, I have one question. Did they fix the weird price discrepancy between the minigun option on the Marine Corps Osprey and the SOCOM Osprey? Because with the Marine Corps, where's the Marine Corps? There's the Marine Corps Osprey. The minigun is 5 points. SOCOM, the minigun is 10 points. Why is there a discrepancy here? Just make it the same point value. I don't care if they increase the price for this. If they bring this up to 10 points. It is the exact same upgrade between the two of them. I do not understand why there is a price difference when it does the exact same thing. Just unify the prices, please. I don't care if they up that to 10 points. Just unify the prices. UH-60M, Chinook. Oh, and they made the AH-6 even cheaper. It's interesting that they're making the MH-60M slightly more expensive instead of slightly less, because I'm honestly not sure what the MH-60M has to offer over the UH-60M aside from just better vision. And is it slightly faster? I mean, I know I can see further, but no, it just has double the vision. That's literally the only difference. And it has more ECM. The Silent Hawk is also getting more expensive. Makes sense, I suppose. The Osprey, the MH-47G. Alright. And then we have aircraft. The Orion, all the MQ-1s, the Global Hawk, the MQ-9, the RQ-170, base HP reduced to 10. This is kind of confusing to me because I'm not sure what damage threshold you exceed by dropping the HP down by that much. I mean, the only thing I can think of is that it now is going to require um, two 7 damage man pads hits to actually bring the drone down instead of 3. But that does more than 15. What about the Tor? The Tor does 14. Okay, so that now becomes a one-shot. That was already a one-shot. That becomes 2 shots. That becomes a one-shot. So I guess what they're doing is to make sure that you can bring them down with one seed missile that's... Or not seed, but one shore-head missile that's bigger than a man-pad's. I mean, that's a one-shot. Okay. Low-flying UAVs are now considered as helicopters for weapon target logic. This one is very interesting because not only does that mean that you could have certain weapons like autocannons engage them on IFVs. This also, at least from my understanding, if I'm understanding what they're saying here correctly, means that even infantry weapons could fire at them. And the thing is, stealth value-wise, if your infantry's in a building, it's only going to be spotted at a distance of like, I think it's 570 to like 680 meters. And most infantry weapons can shoot out either at that distance or slightly further. So, and even then, I think it's like 571 for any drone with a 2,000 meter vision range, which I think is this without the upgraded sensors, and then this with this thing with the upgraded sensors. That range becomes 2,400, and that distance goes out to, I think it's like 680. That it would take for the drone to spot infantry in a building, because buildings basically double the stealth value of a infantry unit. So a basic infantry unit with 1.75 stealth goes up to 3.5 stealth. Also, forests do the exact same thing. Target reacquisition capability has been removed from the KH-38M and the AGM-65 Maverick. Dispersion multiplier at panic has been increased, so they're more likely to miss when panicked. Air-to-air missiles no longer lose accuracy due to pilot stress. That makes a degree of sense. Availability limits for all 4-card aircraft have been reduced to 2. Availability limits for all transport planes have been reduced to 1. I don't necessarily like that, but I'll explain in a minute. Decoy quantity on aircraft has been increased from 15 to 50, or from 20 to 100. Afterburner fuel consumption multiplier reduced. New principle of aircraft refund timers. General rearm time logic is as follows. Rocket pods and dumb bombs rearm the fastest. High drag bombs rearm slower. Both bombs and rocket pods are caliber dependent. Smart bombs and AGMs rearm relatively longer. Cruise and seed missiles rearm the longest. Air superiority fighters rearm significantly faster. So if I understand what they're saying here is that the timer, the refund timer, is no longer going to be limited to cost. It's basically going to be limited to how long it takes the aircraft to rearm. So that's at least from my understanding. Also, they have ammunition pricing. If I'm going to be entirely honest, I do not know how to read this graph. I'm pretty sure someone does, but that someone ain't me. So I don't understand. Um, I don't understand it. I have tried looking through it. I don't understand it. So I'm certain it makes sense to someone. That someone is not me, unfortunately. Aim time for cruise missiles has been returned to 1 second, and for smart bombs it has been completely removed. As a balancing alternative, the aim time now begins to count not parallel to the climb, but only after reaching a high altitude. So basically, if your plane was flying at low altitude and you tell it to drop a precision, a smart bomb, the aim time would start as the plane starts to climb. Now it starts only when the plane reaches maximum altitude, which I guess is kind of interesting. A separate drop mode has been added for smart bombs, which completely ignores the laser and is always forcibly used when dropping such weapons in a bombing run. Back in update 1.0.10, they dropped the number of F-35s down from 4 to 2 because there was an issue where if you told the plane to just drop bombs as in a regular bombing run, and you had them loaded with laser guided bombs, the dropped bombs would still home in on a laser, which would basically allow you to precision drop the bomb, for lack of a better term, but get around the aim time. So they dropped the number of F-35s down to 2 as they tried to search for a solution. This is their solution. Apparently, they're not going to bring the number of F-35s back up to 4 because they said the limits, availability limits for all 4-card aircraft have been reduced to 2. Rearm and resurrection times for cruise missiles and nuclear weapons from strategic bombers has been adjusted. Auto fire at ground targets for some weapons during low altitude flight in their direction has been added. I think that could be interesting. Aircraft with CAS flight profile, the SU-25, the A-10, got their maneuverability increased. Any amount of bombs can fit into a minimum bombing run area with no restrictions. Strategic bombers and transport planes now fly higher at high altitude. Improved behavior strategic bombers for using cruise missiles. Improved airdrop ergonomics. And we now apparently have the option to drop units one at a time or conduct a full emergency drop. Cruise missile stats have been standardized across all variants. I would genuinely like more information on what that means. Weapon parameters have been adjusted. The S-25, I assume that's the S-25 rocket. Magazine reload and delay between shots reduced. Which is interesting because I don't think the S-25 has a magazine. I think it's just a dumbfire rocket. Where is the SU-33? I assume they're talking about this thing. I could be wrong, but I assume they're talking about this thing. Aircraft rocket pods, magazine reload time, and aim time reduced. Prices have been adjusted, and basically they just brought the prices for all the transport planes down by a lot, which would be nice if you actually had the ability to use more than one transport plane in your deck. Because if I'm going to be entirely honest, and again, this is coming from someone who doesn't play multiplayer, I like the idea of airdropping things. A couple weeks ago, when the developers were doing a Q&A, I submitted a question basically saying, or really it was putting forward the idea that instead of having units, instead of making units armor package just remove its ability to be airdropped, have the armor package increase the unit's weight, but still have it retain the ability to be airdropped. And by doing that, what you do is you can still airdrop units, but you can't airdrop as many in a single aircraft. I like the ability to airdrop things, and it doesn't appear that we have that, which is annoying. And that just brings me back here. So, overall, I don't know. I've got mixed feelings about this. Overall, I like some of the changes. Like, I like the infantry changes. I believe they reduced cost for a number of these. Even if I'm not exactly a fan of the availability reductions, I like some of the reduced cost for infantry and helicopters. I like the changes to tanks. I'm kind of on the fence about the changes to artillery. I'll have to experiment with that on the test build. Maybe play a few scenarios and see what it's like. I'm not a fan of the SAM changes. And some of the aircraft changes I'm also not really a fan of. Mainly because, I don't know, it feels like you're making aircraft more prevalent, or harder to counter, but possibly, I don't know, less prevalent? Is that what they're trying to do? Make aircraft less common, but make it so that when someone does bring out an aircraft, it's harder to counter? I don't know. I don't know. Me personally, I would just prefer... Okay, so one idea that I had prior to the game actually coming out and me experimenting with deck building. One idea that I had was basically taking something like the F-16CJ, giving it the 2 fuel tanks, and then giving it a loadout like this, and then just putting like 3 or 4 of them in my deck. And the idea is that I could cycle between them, so I would always have a combat air patrol up that can engage either enemy aircraft or enemy enemy SAMs. Now, I realize now that idea is stupid, given the way the game works, but that's the way I was thinking. Another example, and again, this kind of comes from the November beta, was having something like this, for example. Just putting 3 or 4 of these in my deck so I could have a constant combat air patrol circling overhead. I know that I kit out a lot of the F-15, the F-15EXs in my deck. I kit them out a lot like this. And the idea is that you can put the plane up, and the plane can just loiter for a time. And it has more than enough missiles to knock down pretty much anything that comes at you. In fact, honestly, getting them out like this would probably be even better. Because really, when are you going to need to use 8 AMRAAMs or 4 Sidewinders? Or heck, you can even make an argument for 12 AMRAAMs and 4 Sidewinders. But that's kind of the problem. When is this useful? Like, honestly, when is this loadout useful? When am I going to be sitting there thinking, I really wish I had an F-15EX with 12 AMRAAMs? I mean, heck, you can make an argument that 8 AMRAAMs is excessive. So, I understand that they want to change aircraft, and I'm not entirely sure how they want to change aircraft, because like I said, I thought they wanted to make aircraft less common, but I don't know. I thought they wanted to make aircraft less common, and with the way that they seem to be doing it, it seems like aircraft aren't going to be as common, but they're going to be a lot harder to counter when they do show up. Short of maybe just pulling out an air superiority fighter of your own. But I kind of want aircraft to be more common. more common to a degree, like with air superiority fighters. They said the air superiority fighters are gonna rearm significantly faster, but what I kind of want to see is a cost reduction when it comes to things like air superiority fighters, specifically, or maybe the cost of ordnance, or the cost of air-to-air ordnance. So take this, keep the cost of all the AMRAAMs the same, but jack up the cost of everything else, and then lower the cost of the base aircraft. So that if I take nothing but AMRAAMs or air-to-air missiles, the cost is lower. But if I take more air-to-ground ordnance, the cost is roughly what it'd be. Like, for example, if I wanted to kit it out with something like this, okay? If I wanted to kit it out with something like this, keep the cost of these, maybe increase the cost of this by, like, this to 150 and that to 330, but drop the overall plane cost down to, by like 150 points. So that when I bring this load out, instead of being 380, it's like 230. Actually, 105, 175, 195. But that's kind of what I was thinking. So it's a lot cheaper to bring air superiority fighters, because I think that could be a good way to help rein in aircraft. Another problem is that with air superiority fighters, if you have a bunch of SAMs sitting in your backline, then they're going to be taking pot shots at the air superiority fighters. Which, I'm not opposed to the damage changes for SAMs. The thing that really makes me raise an eyebrow is the range changes. Because I don't know. I'm not entirely convinced on the range changes. But anyway, that's that. So, and those are my thoughts on it. So, it is what it is, I suppose. I guess we'll see next Wednesday when the PTE build actually goes live.